Okay, so welcome everyone to the first NNUG virtual event. So my name is Håkan Silvernagel and I will be your host for tonight. But before we start, I'm just going to give you some basic background information about us. So we are part of the .NET Foundation and we're also part of the International .NET Association. And we are an independent user group with a focus on .NET. And we are by developers and for developers. So these meetups, we are trying to find people that have practical experience with the things that they are talking about. So if you want to have a presentation, you can reach us on either on our email, oslo@nnug.no, or you can also find us on Twitter. Or if you know someone that you think this would be a great speaker or a topic that you would be interested in. And we would also like to thank our sponsors that you can see here on this slide. So without the sponsors, we wouldn't be able to have these events that we've had. And this is the current organization committee for this year. So if you see any one of us out and about, you can just grab us and talk to us if you have something that you want to tell us. And we have a special sponsor here tonight. So tonight we are at Microsoft's office. So we are some part of the organization committee here together with the speaker, just to try to make it a little bit, less virtual and try to bring in the real world into this presentation. So we also have a Microsoft badge here. So you can get a learner digital badge if you go to this address, and we'll post this into the chat in a short while. And you can also learn more about building your first Azure application on MS Learn. And tonight we also have a competition. So the winner of the best tech question will receive a swag pack from Microsoft to your home address. So please be active and post questions in the chat, and we will have a Q&A session after the presentation. The topic for tonight is Understanding Azure App Configuration with Sven Malvik. And the presentation will last around 30 minutes, and then after that we will have a Q&A session. So with that, I would like to introduce Sven.
Hello.
So, hi Sven, how are you?
Yes, I'm fine, Håkon.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me here.
And who are you?
I'm Sven Malvik. I work at Vips in the cloud platform team as the head of this team. And we are about 10 developers, 12, something like that, and working on everything that has with infrastructure to do and helping the teams to onboard them into our AKS cluster and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get this idea to talk about tonight's topic?
I read a blog post or something in May that Azure App Configuration gets in GA, and I thought, wow, that's super interesting because we have lots of config files in our applications, of course, and that's hard to update them without restarting or redeploying them. And for that, we have a Java config server, and this config server has a repository. And in this repository, we have lots of properties. So that means that a config server has this dependency to a repository. It needs Azure DevOps or agents up and running all the time. And when this doesn't work, that means this dependency to Azure DevOps, a production system cannot be updated. So that's why it was super interesting to work with this service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds very interesting. So I'm looking forward to your talk. So the stage is yours.
Thank you. Okay.
I will talk about understanding or about Azure App Configuration. Why I told you right away. So first of all, we talk about how we can use Azure App Configuration. We take an overview, go into the portal, provision it, check how it works. Then we will provision or dive into a web application. I used for this demonstration a Spring Boot web application, but it really doesn't matter. It could be a .NET application as well. There's an SDK that is super easy to use. Then there's Azure DevOps, where you do all your CI/CD pipelining, and they have variables, which is basically key values. But you can also use Azure App Configuration for that. And how you can do this and replace Azure DevOps variables, I will show you. Referencing key vault secrets, because Azure App Configuration is about configurations. Secrets is the same. So how can you work with that? Import export, because you can synchronize your configurations between app services and other app configuration services and properties and stuff like that. Then you would maybe like to automatically synchronize all your properties with app configuration. There's a GitHub action for that I will show you. And at the end, I would like to talk about event-driven configuration management, how we do it in VIPS, because in VIPS we have infrastructure as code, and based on the configuration, we change infrastructure. How we do this, I will demonstrate you with an example where I used Azure API Management, which is for us the front door to Azure Kubernetes Service, basically. Okay, let's start. So why app configuration? App configuration is really to separate all your configurations with code, basically. So as I told you in the beginning, where Håkan asked me to why we are doing it, it's really to having not configuration within the application. And having this within the application makes it really hard to change something, because you have to reload and restart or redeploy your applications. Also, when you have configurations that multiple services or tools are using, then an external service like Azure App Configuration is perfect. Okay, first of all, I would like with you to deploy it, just that you have seen it. Just need to find here, right. I just upload this one because I'm not sure if my session is still valid. I go in here, type add, and I go here, app configuration. I choose app configuration, and then add. And I can give it a resource group. I can give it a name, a location, and then I have the pricing tier. The pricing tier is quite interesting because there are two options. You can first of all use the free one. That's the one I will use now. There you have no SLA whatsoever. You have history of your configuration. So whenever you change, you have history, but only for 7 days. In the standard, you have 30 days, and so on. But I will use the standard one for now. I already have, of course, provisioned an instance, so we don't need to wait. So let me make this a bit larger and make this disappear. First of all, we have our public available IP address here that we will use. Then we have access keys. Those access keys, we have read-write keys and we have read-only keys, and then we have primary and secondary, ID, secret, and connection string. We will use all of them in the demos I will show you. Then we can scale up and down, again, free and standard. And then the first one, which is very interesting, is the Configuration Explorer here. That's where we have all of our configurations. And I already have deployed some of them. But let's just, before we look at some of them, now or later, let's just create one basic key value here, just to see how simple it is. I can have my key 11, because I have one with 10. My value 10, and we can label it if we want. If we have for our test system, for example, a different value than for our production system, we can label them with production or test or whatever. We can set a content type, so JSON or whatever we want. In this case, I do nothing. So now it's provisioned and I have my key here. I can show values and I see my value here. So I can, of course, change it afterwards if I want, but I think it's okay. Then I have the feature manager. We go and dive into feature flags a bit later. For now, I will just go back here to my presentation if I found it. I'm not sure where it is. There. And we'll try to use Postman now. Postman to read it and to see how the REST API of Azure App Configuration works. Okay, I have here chosen my URL. That was the public available URL I have. I have a key value here. And if I just send, then it basically, I get all those keys. If I choose my key 11, I should get this one where I have a spelling error. So this works only because I added some values or some headers. And this makes this a bit more complicated. If I go into the pre-request scripts, I have lots of code here. First of all, I have credentials, which is an ID that I showed you in the access keys, and I have my secret. Of course, I shouldn't post them here, but I could have them in a keyword or anything else. What I have to do first, I have to sign them, and with this code, and then I get set some headers, and then I add those headers then to the request, basically. I have this code, all this code is available to you, and you can use it. I will provide you the link later, just to show you that it's some work to get access, basically, to Azure API or app configuration. But with this headers in place, you can just get whatever you want out of app configuration, which makes it really nice. Then the next is the feature manager, which is also very nice. I will demonstrate it you if I find my here. I have the feature manager. So the feature manager is basically for toggling code in your application. So there is this, a lot of people are working, or developers are working with Git Flow. In Git Flow, you have lots of branches. You have the master branch, you have the developer branch, you have the hotfix branch, you have the feature branch. You have probably lots of more branches. And if you are a project with many developers, many teams, and working on the same code base, and we did this at NAV in Forelderpenger, then it's super hard to not having merge conflicts. So what we use then, or introduce, is trunk-based development, where you basically have one master branch and very short-living feature branches or whatever branches that you constantly merge to your master branch. The problem is just when you have a feature which is a bit bigger, maybe, you need some days, you cannot merge them just to master and go into production. So that's why you have to have some if else condition around that code with booleans. And those booleans are then those feature flags that you can set in app configuration. So in this case, I can add a key here. I can my feature basically here, I can label it as well, and then I can apply it, and then I have my feature, and it is off in this case. And what I can now do, I have this information, and I can use it in my applications. So when I go into the Configuration Explorer, I see here that this was added, basically ordinary configuration with a prefix, which is .appconfig.featureFlag. And it also has a special content type here, which I don't see here. Okay, that was feature flags. But now let's see how this those configurations and feature flags work in a Spring Boot application. Again, this could be a .NET application, super easy. It's just that I don't know .NET. I'm coming from Java. Okay, I'm going into here, and I have created a Spring Boot application. This Spring Boot application is based on a tutorial from Microsoft. There were some bugs and errors. I created pull requests. They were merged. Then I simplified this application a bit and posted on GitHub, so you can easily download it. It's just to get started. So first of all, we need libraries. We need two libraries, basically, the Spring Cloud Azure Feature Management web, and the same for config, for the configuration. There's more libraries without web. With web means basically it can dynamically change that. So whenever you make a change in your feature flag or in your configuration, you will see this immediately, this change. Then we have not the properties, we'll come back to that later, but when we need also to tell our application, sorry for that, our applications where to connect to. I will do this here. Let's first do this before we move on. I can do export, I can do this, and then I need my connection string. So I can go in here, connection. I can take the read-only values and copy paste the connection string, go in here, paste it, and I'm good. Then I have my my cache expiration. I set it to 1 second, so we will see immediately effect. And the default is 30 seconds. Before we dive into the code, and the code is super limited, there's almost nothing to do, but we'll just start it. And I have my README here. I just copy it like this. And then we wait some seconds. In the meantime, I go back to my browser, go to localhost and refresh it. So now it's done. And I see that I have this spaceship application with a text, the future was yesterday. This text is based on a configuration. So let's take a look first at app configuration. And I have here a message. A config message. This config message has the value the future was yesterday. So this key is called application/config.message. We'll talk about this in a moment. First of all, let's change it to see that actually something happened. So the future is tomorrow, because it really is tomorrow. And then we can go into the spaceship again, and then we updated it, and we see immediately the update. So this works. So let's look at how it is implemented. Go back into the code, into the Java application, and here I have my model. The model shows us the message itself. The message property is called message, and this has a prefix config. We saw it in the configuration explorer that we had a prefix /application/config.message. So this is config. And then we have /application in the beginning, and this is hard-coded in the SDK of this Spring Boot library. So that's where it comes from. So we need to have this prefix here, application/config. This is super important. The next is the feature manager. we had this beta here, which you can set on and off. I have it on. If I set it to off now, it takes immediately effect. Now it's gone. And the code for that is in the controller. I have my basic get endpoints here for welcome and also for my other page, better, which is basically the same. But I set attributes then to this controller or to this page, which is better and message. The only thing I do is set call feature manager is enabled async. The same is true for a .NET Core library as well. And for messages, I just read out the model. I do nothing more. And this only works because I added those libraries to this application. This is everything that is. This application is pure Spring Boot. The only difference to a normal Spring Boot is those libraries that I added and those 2 lines here. Okay, we'll talk about prefix in a moment. There's one more thing that is super important or very interesting. How do we work in a DevOps environment? I mean, when I want to change something, previously I had all my configurations in the application. And that's where the truth is, the source of the truth. But tomorrow or now, I have it in app configuration. So when I make changes in app configuration, I, of course, would like to see the change also in my property file. Or even better, I make changes in property file, and then app configuration gets updated automatically. And there's a GitHub action for that. The GitHub action is called app configuration sync. Let's show this one here, Azure App Configuration Sync. And that lets you exactly do that. I have a Git workflow, GitHub Actions workflow for that also inside my repository. And this is here. And there I first base my action on the master branch. I set the file I want to look at. In particular case, it's production properties. And then I run a job for checking out the repository. And then I use this GitHub Actions app configuration sync based on this property file. I use the format properties. I could also use JSON, or I could use YAML. I set the connection string. I mean, again, I shouldn't hard code it here. I should maybe store it as a GitHub secret or anything else. And then I have to set the prefix here. And remember, the prefix is important for that my application can run and read this value. So here I set this property. And I have here my property file, and the future was yesterday. It's already there, but let's change it again to the future will never come, something like that. And then I open a new terminal here. And I will run my git add, git commit, and git push. I have just a shortcut for that. GX. And what happens now is that this is my GitHub repository. If I go to actions here, I see that it runs now for 10 seconds ago. And I go now back in my APM configurations instance in the configuration manager. And then I look for a message. Let me just make this a bit larger here and show values. I see it still, refresh it, and now I see the future will never come. So that way you can easily update your properties and without dealing with the app configuration at all. So next, Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps. We use it at VIPS a lot. We have most of all of our pipelines there. And I will show you something that you can do with Azure DevOps, because in Azure DevOps, you have release pipelines, you have build pipelines, and you have release pipelines, so CI and CD. I will focus now on a CD pipeline where you deploy. And you have variables there, variables that you can use in your tasks, basically. Those variables are injected as environment variables on the agents where your tasks are running. But now I want to use Azure App Configuration instead of Azure DevOps variables. So I have a task here called Azure App Configuration. Basically, there are two tasks, Azure App Configuration and Azure App Configuration Push. Push pushes, of course, and this reads or downloads the configurations. Here you set your subscription. You then find the app configuration instance that you have. In my case, I have just one. And then with the star, I choose all the keys I want, basically. I also can set the label, but since I haven't set any label, I won't use it. And then in the next, I just will print it out. So I can run it now, and we can wait a minute, but I have, of course, already done this before. And we see here that it didn't go too well. And the reason for that is that we have also read secrets from the key vault. We'll look at this very soon. But the thing is that this client that you are running here will first ask app configuration to give me the key vault value. But this value is just a reference. That means that the client of this task will need to ask the key vault to get the value then. And that's why you need access to it. And I don't have access right now. That's why it's not working. But when you go in the next task here, where I just printed out everything, I have, for example, this appc key, my value. And if I go into here, I see appc key, my value. And then you can work with the rest of the task or the next tasks and just read from the environment variables and get all the keys you want. It works basically exactly the same way as Azure DevOps variables work. Okay, let's find the presentation here. Referencing key vault secrets is the next thing. So first I have, I will just copy something here that I will explain right in a minute. Okay, so what we are doing to now is to use the AZ client for reading secrets out of the key vault. But first of all, we need to have secrets in the key vault. And we have already, because I did it, but let's just create one more key value reference. I can call it my key vault secret. I can label it, of course. I can, or I have to reference an existing key vault then. So I won't store secrets in app configuration. I still have them in the key vault. And when I have access to it, I select the secret that I want to reference then. So I do this, and I choose the latest version, apply it. And then you see here that I have my key vault secret, and I have a reference just to it, not the value. So can take a look here, edit. No, sorry. Make it a bit larger here, which is a bit hard, it seems. Oh, it doesn't work. Anyway, you just see that this is just a reference to it. But now I want to use the AZ client or the command line interface to resolve the value of it, because I don't want to call app configuration and then key vault again. I want just call app configuration because it's much easier for me. So the way I can do it, I can call az app config key vault key value, sorry, and then export it. We'll look at import and export very soon. I provided my instance, the name of my my app configuration. I want to store it as a file. The path of the file is right here. I call it my secret. The format should be YAML. Yes, I don't want to have any questions, just do it. And then I will resolve the key vault, and I don't want to have features now. Then I run it, and I will get very soon the my secret.yaml file, which contains all the keys with all the values. When I have this value file, this YAML file, I can use it in my Helm chart, basically. When you provision services to deploy services to AKS for Azure Kubernetes Services, for example, you use Helm charts for the most. And those Helm charts need also property files or configurations. And those are in YAML files. And what you can do now, you can add this configuration file to the Helm chart. And here's how it looks like. My secret YAML, which has my keys resolved. If I need it or not is not the question, but I have it at least here, and I can do whatever I want. I could inject it in the next phase, for example. Okay. Import export. Let's take a look at import export. If I find my my browser, I have import export here, where I can import files or configurations from a different instance. I can import it from app services because they have settings that you can use only for app services, of course, but you can import them here. And you can also use configuration files and this properties, YAML or JSON, which is quite nice. Okay, so last, that's my favorite. This is event-driven configuration management, which is quite interesting because at VIPS we have two AKS clusters. One is active and the other one is inactive. The reason for it is when we upgrade AKS, and in the beginning we had only one AKS cluster, but when we upgraded it, you may have noticed this or read on Wege that VIPS was down. This was once or twice during the night. And it's, of course, a problem. So what you can do is, instead of just upgrading an existing AKS cluster, you can work with node pools, basically. Just get a new version on the node pool and provision all the application on the new node pool. Problem here is that you have the control plane, which needs to be updated before. And when this has problems, then you cannot do anything. So this is a risk that we didn't want to take. So that's why we provision an entirely new AKS cluster, which we just call blue and green. For today, it means on or off, but tomorrow maybe we can switch over 10% or so. In front of that, we have API management, which is really the front door towards all of our services. And this has policies, which is basically code saying go to this cluster or this cluster. And it does it based on a color, green or blue. And then the traffic goes to blue or to green. Now we have our infrastructure completely as code in a GitHub repository. And those configurations are telling everything, but also the color, which is active, blue or green. So what we do is we change in the configuration the color from blue to green. GitHub Action then will change or run and update our instance of app configuration. Then app configuration sends an event which other services can subscribe to. In our case, it's Azure Automation, where we have a runbook which gets triggered whenever there's a change in app configuration. And based on this trigger, we update, or first we read again from app configuration to get the value. We just know that there was a change, but not what has changed. So get the value from app configuration and then update API management. And I really want to show you how this works. First, I do not have infrastructure as code right here, but I have this spaceship application with my production property where I have this value here, test blue. I will change that, and API management should get updated. First of all, let's take a look also at app configuration. I have API management, sorry. I have API management here, and there's all my APIs and so on, but I have also named values. And named values are just properties, key values. And I have this value here saying test, and this is blue right now. So when I go back to my application and change this one to green, and then I update it, I know, because I showed already, that app configuration gets updated. So if we go, let me just duplicate this one here and go to app configuration again. Configuration, and then I have somewhere test here. Need to make it visible. Test has a value, no, sorry, here. Application config test, because we have this prefix, and it's now in green. So that means that I am in a stage where this is updated, and the event grid gets this information, and my automation runbook knows that. So if I go into app configuration again and just look at the events here, I see that I have a runbook here that I connected to this. And if I, oops, sorry, I clicked something that I maybe shouldn't. If I go here, let me just go to the runbook directly, like here. So I saw that there were two changes at 5:38. Two changes because I have two entries in my property file. And this one here, for example, is config messages. And I have also, sorry, was the runbook that disappeared? Now there it is. And I have the same then for test. So, and whenever this trigger comes, I will run a runbook. This runbook looks a bit, looks now complicated, but it really does nothing. The only thing it does is it updates the value here of API management with a value. And this value is retrieved from my Azure App Configuration instance. So I could do this super simple with a PowerShell command, get value from the app configuration service, but this doesn't exist yet. There's no command that gets you a list of all the keys and values, or just for the one key. It doesn't exist. So that's why I have to get back to the REST API, sign the requests, and do all that stuff to get the value. And this is basically all that's happening here. That's basically the same code as you saw in the beginning of the Postman, just translated to PowerShell. But when I get then this value back, I have my API management instance and go to named value, and now it is green. So this worked. And this way we can just make changes in the configuration file of our infrastructure repository, and we move to our inactive AKS cluster, and we are finished. If you want to try it yourself, I wrote a couple of blog posts about that at my blog, and they are all detailed, and everything I showed you, all the code is there, and yeah, thank you very much.
Sven, let's see here. We have any questions here from YouTube or Twitch, or maybe we have some questions here from the live audience. Yeah, let's see here. We actually got the question in there. So there's a question here from Torsten Nikolaisen. Do you know how Feature Manager compares to Unleash?
Actually, the only thing that I did with Unleash was installing it and configuring it. No, I have no experience with Unleash. It's Finn did that one a couple of years back, and I know that there are a couple of companies working with that, and it would be super interesting to see how this compares to each other. But I haven't worked with it yet. Feature management is a topic that it's really great, because I just showed you a tiny thing of it, because you can also say that I want to have only 50% rooted to my or I have 50% that gets true and the other 50% false, or I have can make it based on a time. And I think it's evolving anyway very soon. So.
Okay, we got the second question here. This question is also from Torstein. So he asks, how does the app get the value from a setting that is a key vault reference?
Actually, app configuration doesn't get the value directly. It's the client responsible still for retrieving this value. That's what also I showed in the one demo where I showed the DevOps task. The DevOps task didn't have access to it, because it's the DevOps task, also the client, that is responsible for getting the value. It's not app configuration. App configuration is just the reference, nothing more.
So with that, I think we've covered some questions here. So do you have any other
questions?
If people want to reach out to you, what is the best way to find you?
If anybody could connect with me on LinkedIn, that would be great. So then just get in touch with me and we can have a chat. Invite you to Lips if you want. Yes,
that sounds good. So with that, I want to thank all of you, the people who has been watching this online, but also those of you who watches this afterwards. And I would also ask you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you will get notified when we next go on a virtual event here. So thank you so much, and I wish you a great afternoon.